guys, welcome back to another episode of Between You and Me. Today is episode 10, which means it is our final episode of this portion of the season. I know this doesn't make much of a difference to you guys listening, whether we're on season 6 or 7 or 8 or 9 or 10, but I did do a big change from season 5 to 6, adding video, changing my graphics and all of that. So I don't think we're going to have many more changes for the next season coming up. For those of you guys that don't know, I take a couple months break in between every 10 episodes and I name it a new season. Since this one's not really going to have many changes since I did a big 360 for this season, I think we're going to keep it season 6 and move forward with another 10 episodes in a couple months. Just so you guys know, this is technically isn't the end of season 6, but it is the end of this portion of weekly podcasts. Okay, cool. So let me get comfortable quickly. We have a lot to talk about today. And I've been noticing in my video episodes, completely unrelated, but my hair is always just fucked up. And I only realize it after I'm editing the video. Also my eyebrows. If you guys watch the podcast episodes on YouTube, you'll maybe be able to catch that, unfortunately. But for today's episode, I wanted to end off this portion of the season with a bang, with something that will leave you guys something to think about. And this is something that I want to do myself, integrate into my life myself. What I like talking about within my podcasts are either things, I say this all the time, but things I've experienced and I feel like I have a good grasp on to talk to you guys about, or things that I'm learning about right now and wanting to implement into my own life. So we're kind of in the same journey together. If you're clicking on this video, if you're clicking on this podcast episode, you might be in a position where you feel like your life is a bit stale, where you feel like you're kind of craving a change, something different. And in my case scenario, I'm sure if you guys have been listening to the podcast episodes from the start, you'll know that I've been through a lot of different phases when it comes to the way that I feel about my life. I've let out a lot of rant episodes when I've just been in super big ruts when it comes to my career, my self-motivation, my, motivation in life in general, determination, all of it. I have talked about how difficult it has been when it comes to the position that I am in my life and the power that I feel like I have to change it. And in this episode, I want to talk to you guys about rewriting your life. Me personally, I feel like I want to delve into kind of taking a bigger position as the author of my life rather than just the viewer, just the audience. Because I think sometimes we tend to be in this cycle of survival and are just stuck in like a loop of living our lives the way we're used to it, of acting based on our past experiences and holding on to past versions of yourselves and not being able to kind of shed them and start new chapters and change as a person and look at your life differently. That's why I want to talk about this. I want to start doing it, and I believe that, I guess, if you guys are clicking on this, you want to do that as well. So your story means your personal narrative, right? It means the way that you have viewed your life to be. This is based on the stories that we tell ourselves about who we are, and it's also based on the stories that we hear from other people, from, for the most part, people who have a power in a sense of that they can mold us. People like our parents, our teachers, our guardians, our aunts, our uncles, our grandparents, people that we look up to. The way that they speak about us, the story that they tell us about who we are, molds the way that we look at ourselves, molds our personal narratives and our life stories. Some things in our lifetime, before our brains fully develop, before we can take those short-term memories and turn them into long-term memories, our parents or whoever was taking care of us will tell us stories. Our older siblings will tell us, oh, this is what you did when you were younger. You acted like this. You used to do this a lot. You used to do that a lot. These pieces of our past and our history are told to us and absorbed into us, and that's how we create our personal narratives. Sometimes we're not even 100% aware of the narrative that we've created about ourselves, But it's important to be, because that changes the way that we move in our futures. It changes the way that we carry ourselves. It changes the way that we look at the world. It changes the way that we interact with other people. And it changes the way that we think about ourselves first and foremost, right? We adopt these beliefs about, like I said, the world and ourselves, etc. And once again, it will have an effect on the way that you interact with the world now. And it has a bigger effect than you might think on your day-to-day, on your life choices, from the smallest to the biggest ones. And I'm going to get into an example based on myself of how these narratives that you've created and other people have created for yourself can change the way that your life looks right now. Your personal narrative is also the building block of who you are. From such a young age, you're told that you're so-and-so, or you remember your memories from your childhood being that you were this type of person. And a lot of the times we keep that with us. We're not creatures of change, we're creatures of habit. So we continue the same patterns over and over and over and over and over again until something breaks that pattern. So the narratives that are built about us will help us answer things like, will I be safe in this world? Am I loved? Will others be there for me? Will others leave me? Very core questions about who we are as people, how safe the people around us are, and how safe the world around us is. So to give you guys perspective over a narrative that you could have about yourself, I'll tell you guys how I believe my narrative came to be when I was a child. I think that throughout my life, the narrative that was given to me by my parents was that they were always very overprotective of me. I was always the sensitive child in the family. I have two other sisters, an older and a younger sister. They were a lot more independent than me. They didn't need as much emotional care from my parents as I did. They were able to self-soothe a lot better. They didn't ask as much for help in certain areas when it came to their emotions. I had a lot of anxiety as a child, and I still do. And because of that, I feel like my parents would kind of bubble wrap me from the world so that I felt safer. And that was their way of protection, right? That was their way of making sure, like, oh, like, we need to keep Alex safe. We need to make sure she's happy and that she doesn't like get hurt out there in the world. Because of this, you're given this narrative in your mind from a young age that I am sensitive, I'm emotional, I need my parents, I need people around me to protect me, I can't protect myself. Another example could be my teachers all throughout like elementary school would tell me I was very shy. They would tell my parents during the parent-teacher conferences, she's super shy, she doesn't talk a lot, she doesn't really interact in class very much. She has her friends, but she doesn't really, participate outside of that friend group. We recommend like you take her out of the friend group, you help her become more socialized with the other kids and blah, blah, blah. And so from that, I was also given this self-narrative from teachers that I was a shy person, that I couldn't go out and make friends, that I needed to be pushed out of my comfort zone, and that I was maybe a little more nervous and a little more insecure than the other kids, which was out of the ordinary, right? In both of these situations, I was out of the ordinary, not quote unquote normal. I was overly sensitive, overly emotional, and shy, insecure, and nervous. So these narratives become a part of you because you're told from other people, whether it's directly to you or heard from, a conversation, or this is the way that your parents describe you. And maybe they don't mean any harm. Maybe your teachers don't mean any harm. I don't think they did in my case. But I think that they're not positive words, right? They're not positive situations. They're not affirming. They're not something that makes you feel empowered or confident, really. So when you are told so many times that this is your personality, this is who you are, you absorb that into your narrative, into who you are, into your life's story. So I think from that, the narrative that was written by me my self-narrative, my story, is that I believed I wasn't independent. I believed I wasn't self-reliant. A good chunk of my life, I always very heavily relied on my parents because they were so easily accessible to me, if that makes sense, because they knew I was more sensitive, I was more emotional, I was more anxious. So they gave me the opportunity to be more emotionally reliant on them. Because of that, I feel like I created this story that I wasn't able to only rely on myself. I wasn't able to look inward for support and any form of self-soothing the way I described. So what happens here is the narrative that I created for myself was that going on into adulthood, I needed someone to support me. And where I would find that as I became an adult was in my friendships and in my romantic relationships. What makes this a negative thing, because don't get me wrong, it's not a bad thing to be emotional, which I'll get into, or to be needing emotional support. But is that because you've created this narrative based on other people's perspectives and then based on your own childhood experiences, you almost heighten the extent to which you need that support. For this example about me, I over exaggerated to a certain degree. I guess that's the best word I can think of. How much I needed other people, when in reality, the same as anyone else, I have that independence. I have that ability to self-soothe. But it's taken me such a decent amount of time to acknowledge that. So now that you have a good idea on what your story means, what your narrative, your life story actually means, you will now have a better understanding on what rewriting your story means. I think when people say rewriting your story, when people say let's change the way that you look at your life, let's redo it, let's do this, do that, it doesn't mean ignoring your reality. It doesn't mean ignoring your past, what you've been through, the challenges that you've had, because I don't think that's very realistic. I don't think when I say let's rewrite your life, let's change the way you look at things, let's do things differently moving forward, like you should be thinking, okay, let's erase everything that I've done in the past, all these embarrassing, bad experiences, mistakes, issues, traumas, and things that I've been through. It doesn't mean that. It doesn't mean pretending things didn't happen, or even being thankful or glad that certain negative things did happen to you. That's, once again, not realistic. It's also not that easy. What rewriting your story means, at least to me, is reflecting on the life experiences of your past, the same way I just have with you guys, and rewriting what those experiences mean to you. This might sound super woo-woo, but what I'm trying to explain to you guys here is I don't think a lot of us have even taken the time to acknowledge it. I don't think we've come to terms with the way that we do maybe think about ourselves. Like I said, when you take into account your past, your story that other people have told you, the story that you have told yourself, then you can really realize how it affects your life now, how your choices and the people you choose to surround yourself with, your jobs, your career path, your, overall happiness in life can be shifted based on the way you believe your story to be, your narrative. And just one example based on myself that I know has adjusted my own narrative of myself is everything that I spoke to you guys about before, the way I thought about myself, that I needed support from other people, that I was too emotional, sensitive, and that I couldn't do things on my own, became this heavy reliance on relationships. And that attributed greatly to my anxious attachment, which I talked to you guys about a lot. And I think that just is a really easy, 2 + 2 = 4. Because me needing my parents, me having this kind of craving to be taken care of comes with relationships as well, where that is how I perceive myself to be loved, if that makes sense. If someone isn't doing that for me, they're not loving me. And then obviously that can be reflected in anxious attachment, because if someone's not meeting that so and so amount of expectation, if they're being a little avoidant, if they're not meeting me with 100%, then I'll feel anxious, and it's not a good mix. And the root of that can be found through reflection by realizing, okay, maybe it's because I think this about myself. This is my belief that I need other people to feel supported and loved, and that I can't do it by myself. So back to what I was saying. Rewriting your story also means questioning these life events. It means growth. It means looking at your previous life experiences with a new set of fresh eyes. It means not just seeing things the way you did when you were a child, but now you're an adult and now you can actually look at this for what it is and not for what everyone has told you, right? For example, seeing my need for emotional support as a normal human response, because it is. But also, it's not too much, it's not too little, it's not excessive, it's not, a problem by any means. And yes, I was different to my sisters, I was different to my family. They didn't really need that type of emotional support, but I was also similar to a lot of other people in the world. Like, there's a lot of kids that grew up and needed that amount of emotional support or help from their parents, whether it be mentally or emotionally. And truly, I think it's healthy. I think it's healthy to know that you can rely on your parent and they're going to be there for you to support you. And I do also believe that there's a right amount of kind of give for your child to be able to figure things out themselves. And that comes naturally. And I don't think that's something that you need to be worried about as a kid, right? So, like I said, not at the fault of anyone, but I've definitely created that narrative. And now as an adult, I can look back at it and be like, babe, I was just a kid who wanted her parents. Completely normal and fine. As another example, as a child, like I mentioned before, I was bubble wrapped. I was protected from the world. My parents would say I was overly sensitive, couldn't do things on my own, yada, yada, yada. We just said that. But now I can look at it as an adult and realize that I have experienced pretty difficult things. I have done so many things on my own. Actually, everything I've done has been on my own, which is not great. I'd like to be a little more collaborative in my future, but I can pat myself on the back and say I'm literally one of the most independent people that I know. And that's not a good thing or a bad thing. Being not independent is not bad. Being independent is not bad either. So removing this kind of negative stigma that I had on not being able to be independent and realize that, okay, my independence has come, as it does when you age and you get into the time frame of your life where you need to start doing things by yourself. I'm very much capable of everything that I need to do within my day-to-day life. And if I don't know how to do it, I'll figure it out and or ask, and then I will still do it myself. So it's definitely interesting. It's also, to add to that, interesting that I have, once again, like I said, gone through hard experiences, heartbreaks, issues, problems, and then I've still gotten myself out the other end. No matter how emotional I might have taken those situations, no matter how sensitive I was to them, I've still gotten back to a place where I'm neutral, where I'm happy. So it's like, now that we look at it with this fresh perspective, these things don't seem bad anymore. We are rewriting the narrative. Rewriting your story means that you try to find meaning in your life that propels you to be your best self. It means your story is not an excuse for the way that you are. It's not, oh, well, I went through this and that's why I'm like this. That's why I can't be in a relationship is because X, Y, and Z happened to me when I was a kid. I can't do things by myself because my parents did X, Y, and Z when I was a kid. You know, we don't want the way that we look at ourselves to be a big excuse, to be reasons why we have these characteristics that we don't like in our present. Reframing your narrative means finding power in your own stories and being able to grow and develop and mature. And honestly, it's just a really powerful thing. It's something that I think everybody at some point in their lives needs to go through, and to not be the victim of their own story all the time. A lot of people are victims, okay? I'm not taking that away from you guys. Situations that have been really tough and really challenging. But there's also times and different scenarios where we nonstop carry this heavy shit with us all the time, all of our problems, all of the things that people told us about ourselves, all of the, traumas and problems and issues on our shoulders, and then use them as excuses for why we're not happy people and why we weren't able to meet this goal and why we can't go here with our lives. And if we're able to look at these situations in a different light, we're able to change our present and ultimately our future. So I think if we wanted to put this down in a point by point on how to rewrite your life story, it would start with reflecting and recognizing your story. The same way I just did with you guys. Go back, honestly, even more than what I just did, because I only talked about a few different things. Go through, write it down, maybe talk about it with a friend, with your therapist even. Talk to them about how you want to change the way that you look at your life. You don't want to keep having the same negative thoughts about yourself, and you don't want them to be reasons that you're sabotaging your current decisions and life choices. So reflecting and recognizing the patterns in your life that indicate this limiting story about yourself. Go look back at the experiences where you've went wrong before. Go look back at the excuses that you give for them. That goes to my next point, which is question it. Question the narrative. Question the thing that influences your behavior and thoughts in a negative way. There's so many questions to ask, really. When I say reflect, it's so broad because there's so many examples of what it could be that you're thinking of, but find experiences in your life that you reflect on and you're like, okay, this makes me look at myself in a lower light. It could be, you didn't get into a certain university and now you are working a job that you didn't want, but you didn't apply to another university because you didn't get into the one that you wanted. So now you're sitting here a couple years later, you're doing a job you don't like, and you're using that experience as an excuse for the position that you're in right now that you're not happy with. You're also now taking that, absorbing it as a part of your personal narrative and story that you're not capable of making it into difficult programs, let's say, and getting a good job. So now you're going to continue to cruise your way through life with this negative perspective about yourself because you're not going back and questioning it. Find whatever that influences on your behavior and what makes your thoughts go in a negative way based on your life, and look at this negative view based on reality. For this example about not getting into your ideal school, you need to look at it in a sense of, this is life. Life is difficult. It was challenging. It doesn't mean I don't have the skills to do better in the future. It means in this point in time, when I did apply to this school, I wasn't equipped. I didn't have the knowledge. I didn't have what it took at that moment. That doesn't mean I don't have what it takes in the future. That doesn't mean I have to stop trying. I think that we harbor these feelings about ourselves and then immediately shut off. We don't want to go back to what hurt us, basically. So we don't want to try again. That creates even more ammunition for this, old story of yourself to come back and bite you in the ass when you think about it because you suppressed it for so long. So really sit there, question that thought, that viewpoint of yourself, and compare it to new experiences, compare it to how you actually act in your current life and not just past events. Think about the accomplishments, for this example again, that you have had in the past year or two, that you actually did get that job. That was a pretty challenging position to get in. Maybe you don't really exactly like this job, this career and field, but it was still something that you accomplished in that time frame. That doesn't mean it should be viewed as something less, right? We need to change this by questioning it. And then now we're able to create a new story. Next point, reframe your old story in a way that inspires you. With the same example, look at you not getting into the school that you wanted to as inspiration to get into a better school. Look at it as inspiration to change altogether what it is you want to do and try out a different path. Look at it as the stepping stones to trying again. Now you know what it takes to get into that school. Now you can put maybe effort into getting your grades up, taking a couple more credits, and now going and applying to that school again, if that's still what you want. But change the way you see your old story. But be authentic, be honest, and be good about the way you say it. You don't want to be delusional. You don't want to tell yourself lies, because I think your own brain can acknowledge that you're kind of just forcing a mentality that's not coming naturally to it. And if you just sit there and you're like, no, the school rejected me because I was too good. The school rejected me because I was too smart for everyone and I excelled past everyone else. Then, maybe this is something, sure, that might inspire you, but it's not based in honesty and truth. You want to rewrite your story in a way that feels honest and real to you. Remind yourself that there's always room for improvement. It doesn't mean you're perfect, but you can create this new story in a more positive light and begin to look at yourself in a way that will allow you to move forward with more grace for yourself, for your mistakes even, for the accomplishments that you didn't meet, for the things that didn't go the way you planned them to be, for forgiveness for yourself, the way you acted as a child, how people kind of painted a picture of you that wasn't exactly true, all these things. And in my perspective, it's good to remind myself in my new story that I am independent, that I am capable of doing things by myself, that I can face challenging life events and come out the other end, that I'm an emotional person and that's okay, and that I'm a sensitive person and that I have people that respect me for that. And whether or not other people agree with that story, it doesn't matter anymore, because we are creating and rewriting our stories the way we want to be perceived. Now, your next and final step is going to be practicing to tell your new story. This will change the way you approach the world. You need to think about how you address other people when you talk about yourself. Are you always going back and telling the negative stories about your life? I'm so guilty of this. And I literally listened to a video like a couple months ago that was talking about, what if you never talked about your past to a person ever again? What if you never brought up any past story, anything that happened in your past, your childhood, this, that, da, da, da. I know it sounds kind of dramatic, but I thought about it and I was like, if I never spoke about my past, I wonder how much my life would shift. And after that, I became very conscious of how naturally it was for me to speak about my past. And it's not just my past in general that I'm talking about right now, but that video was about the past in general. I'm talking about negative experiences from your past. How often are you using that as an excuse to the people around you for why you are the way that you are? Let's say you get really nervous when you're presenting and you're like, oh yeah, it's because like when I was a kid, I did a presentation, everyone laughed at me. So now I'm like super nervous about presenting. And it's like, okay, but how are you going to change that? How are you going to move forward and not have that past experience torture you every time? Because that's a small example, but there are larger experiences that people go through that still affect them to a much higher degree today when they keep reminding themselves every single time that that's the reason that they feel that way. So it's almost like your words that you speak will become your reality. The more that you practice telling this new story about yourself, this new rewritten story, the more deeper and true it will be for you. Okay, girlies, I hope that made sense. I feel like I left it on a really strong statement there. Yeah, if you guys have any questions about any of the episodes that I've done so far in this season, DM me. Go follow at Between You and Me podcast on Instagram and at Between You and Me pod on TikTok. That actually, the usernames could be backwards, but as long as you type that in or look up my main Instagram and TikTok, you'll be able to find them. I'm going to be doing a lot more and staying a lot more active on that Instagram account while I'm not posting new episodes for a bit, because I want to be able to still interact with you guys. I've been getting a lot of inspiration from a lot of creators, which is great. Love that. But it has inspired me to be a lot more communicative with you guys on the Instagram, give you guys advice through regular posts, through story posts, reels, whatever it might be, and speak to you guys through there just as much as I do on this podcast. I feel like that's the essence of this. Between You and Me, I want to be able to communicate with you guys more. So don't forget to go follow the Instagram. Most importantly, TikTok is still going to be more like, quotes and inspirational things, but Instagram is definitely going to be a lot more interactive between us, between you and me. Okay, guys, thank you so much. I love you guys. It's been such a pleasure, and I will speak to you guys in a couple weeks and or months. I know it feels like a long time, but luckily we have a lot of episodes. So if you haven't heard them all, then go ahead and listen to some of the other ones. But I will talk to you guys in the next part of the season. Bye.